The night Hai Jin Yoon walked into that Tribeca penthouse, he was not looking for anything. That was the thing about men like him. They stopped looking a long time ago. When you own the room before you enter it, when 3 of the evening's investors report to people who report to you, you stop arriving anywhere with expectation. You arrive, you observe, you leave. The world rearranges itself around you, and you feel nothing particular about that anymore. He stood near the window with a drink he was not finishing and watched the room the way he watched everything, completely, without expression, cataloging what was useful and discarding what was not. Then she walked to the center of the room and opened her mouth. No introduction, no announcement. One moment she was standing near the back, and the next she was simply there. Acoustic guitar, one unreleased song, the kind of voice that does not ask the room for anything and gets everything anyway. Hai Jin put his drink down. He did not pick it up again. Welcome to Afro K Mafia Stories, bestie. Now tell us in the comment, what device are you using to watch this story? Do not forget to subscribe to this channel. He watched her the way he watched very few things in his life, with his full attention, nothing held back, nothing managed, not just the voice, her, the way she held eye contact with the room without needing anything reflected back, the way she laughed at something someone said after the performance, genuinely, not for the room, just because something was actually funny, the way she disagreed with a label executive twice her industry rank and did not soften it or apologize for it, and the executive nodded because she was right, and she had said it in a way that left him no other option. Hai Jin had been in rooms with powerful people his entire life. He had never watched anyone move through a room the way she moved through that one. He left without speaking to her. In the elevator, before the doors fully closed, he said one thing to Kwon Tae-min. Her name, a question. Kwon Tae-min already had it. He called her for the first time 4 days later through Renee Okafor, her manager, professional, correctly routed, nothing that could be misread. His entertainment holdings were always looking at emerging talent. That was true. It was also the only part of his reason that was true. By the 3rd week, he had stopped pretending the calls were professional. They talked every night at 10 p.m. She talked about her music, not the industry of it, the actual music, the way a song starts as a feeling she cannot name, and she has to write toward it in the dark until she finds the word that fits. He talked about soul, about his mother, about a version of his childhood that was accurate in its facts and careful in its omissions. She noticed the omissions. He could tell. She had the particular intelligence of someone who hears what is not said as clearly as what is. But she did not push. She simply made space, left her silences open the way you leave a door open, not demanding anyone walk through, just making it possible. He had never met anyone who made space like that. Most people's silences were just impatience wearing a patient face. Hers was something else entirely. 3 months in, on a Tuesday night at 10 p.m., he called, and a man answered. Deep voice, comfortable, unhurried. She's in the shower. Who's calling? Hai Jin ended the call without responding. If you are new here, this channel is where stories like this live. Subscribe before this one gets under your skin. Trust me. He sat in his hotel suite. He kept a permanent suite at a midtown property his organization owned through a holding company nobody connected to his name. And he sat with the silence for 2 hours. He did not call back. He did not ask Kwon Tae-min to find out anything. He sat with it the way he sat with very few things, without moving. Then he got in the car and told the driver her address. Kwon Tae-min found him at 1 a.m. in a parked car on her Harlem block. He had been there for 3 hours. Kwon Tae-min got into the front seat and looked straight ahead and said nothing because he had worked for Hai Jin for 11 years and he understood the difference between situations that required commentary and situations that required presence. This one required presence. Hai Jin sat outside her building for 5 hours total. At 3 a.m., the lobby door opened.
The man who stepped out was large, not aggressively, just structurally, the way former military men carry size, like it was issued to them along with a particular way of scanning a room. He walked directly to the car without hesitating. He had already seen it on the lobby camera. He looked through the window. Jin looked back. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then the man said, "That's my sister's building. Whatever you're doing out here, do it at her door or do it somewhere else." He went back inside. Jin watched the lobby door close. He sat for another 10 minutes. Then he told the driver to go. He did not sleep that night. He lay in his hotel suite and looked at the ceiling and thought about a woman who made space in her silences and a man who had just told him, without raising his voice, exactly where the boundary was. He thought, that is her brother. He thought, I have been sitting outside her building for 5 hours because a man I do not know answered her phone. He thought, I do not do things like this. He thought, I have never done anything like this in my life.
He picked up his phone at 4 a.m. and sent one message to Kwon Tae-min. Who is he? The answer came back in 4 minutes. Marcus Whitmore, her brother, Atlanta, former military intelligence. Jin set his phone down. He almost smiled. Of course she had a brother like that. Of course she did. He called Renee O'Coffer at 8 a.m. the next morning, professionally, correctly, the way he did everything that mattered, through the right channel, at the right time, with the right amount of distance built in so nothing could be misread. He asked, casually, who had answered Zara's phone the previous evening. Renee told him, her brother, visiting from Atlanta. 4 seconds of silence on the line. Thank you, he said, and hung up. He sent flowers to her apartment within the hour. No card. He never sent cards. A card required words, and words required him to name something he was not ready to name in writing. She called him before the flowers had finished being arranged in whatever vase she owned. Did you sit outside my building last night? He said nothing. Hey, Jean. Your brother should not answer your phone. She was quiet for a moment. Then, he's my brother. I know that now. Another silence, longer. Then she said, carefully, the way she said things she actually meant, what would you have done if he wasn't? He did not answer. She let the silence sit between them with all its weight. Then she said, the flowers are white. You mentioned white once, in passing. 3 weeks ago. Yes. She did not say anything to that, but he heard something shift in her breathing, small, almost nothing, and he filed it the way he filed everything she gave him without meaning to. Marcus Whitmore flew back to Atlanta that afternoon. He did not tell Zara what he was thinking. He did not tell Renee either. He simply booked his flight, hugged his sister at her door, told her she needed better locks, and left. On the plane, he opened his laptop. He had run names before, thousands of them in a previous life, for a government that paid him well and thanked him poorly. He knew what a clean record looked like. He knew what a deliberately cleaned record looked like. The difference was in the texture, what was present versus what was conspicuously, carefully absent. He typed Hey Jean Yoon into 3 different databases. What came back was impressive in its surface detail and deeply wrong in its architecture. A private equity profile, board memberships, a philanthropic foundation registered in Seoul, entertainment holdings, real estate, a shipping interest registered through a Luxembourg entity. Everything correctly documented, everything traceable to a point. And then, at a certain depth, the trail ended. Not abruptly, smoothly, the way a path ends when someone has spent serious money making sure it ends there. Marcus sat back in his seat. Clean gaps in a rich man's record meant one thing. Someone had paid to make them clean. He closed the laptop, ordered coffee, looked out the window at clouds.
He thought about his sister's voice when she said, "He's my brother," the slight warmth underneath the correction, the warmth of someone who did not know yet that they were already in something. He picked up his phone and called Renee. "Find out everything you can actually verify about Hae-jin Yoon," he said. "Not what he's told her, what you can confirm independently." Renee was quiet for a moment. "Should I be worried?" "I don't know yet," Marcus said. "That's why I'm asking. If this story is already sitting somewhere in your chest, you know why. Stay with it. Subscribe if you haven't. This one is going to cost you sleep." 3 days later, Zara performed in an industry showcase in Brooklyn. Full room, label scouts, producers, 2 entertainment journalists, the kind of event that could change the shape of a career if the right people were paying attention. Hae-jin was at the back. He had told nobody he was coming. He had rearranged 2 calls and moved a Seoul meeting by 12 hours to make the flight work, and he had not examined why he did that with any particular honesty. She found him with her eyes during the second song, mid-note. She did not miss a beat, not one, but something in her performance changed when she saw him, opened, the way a voice opens when it is suddenly singing for something specific instead of for a room. He stood at the back with his hands in his pockets and watched her and felt, for the 3rd time in his adult life, something he could not organize into a category. After the performance, Denton Farr. Hae-jin watched him cross the room towards Zara from 30 feet away and knew, before the man opened his mouth, exactly the shape of what was about to happen. Denton Farr moved through industry rooms the way certain men move through rooms, with the practiced ease of someone who has never been told no by anyone who mattered. Expensive suit, warm eyes, the specific confidence of a man who had never been publicly held accountable for a single thing he had done privately. He watched Denton's hand land on Zara's arm, watched her professional smile, watched Renee, standing 2 steps behind Zara, go very still in the way of someone who recognizes something dangerous and is deciding how to handle it. Something moved through Hae-jin that was not jealousy. Jealousy was about possession. This was something more precise.
He knew Denton Farr's name, not from the music industry. He left the showcase without speaking to Zara, got into the car, looked at Kwon Taemin. Denton Farr, full picture, everything. Kwon Taemin nodded once. How deep? All the way. The report arrived in 3 days. Kwon Taemin presented it without expression, the way he presented everything, as information, cleanly, with no editorializing. He had long understood that his job was to find things, not to have feelings about them. The surface layer was the music industry documentation. 3 previous female artists, contracts with ownership clauses buried in Exhibit C, publishing splits that transferred fully to Denton's company after 18 months, an isolation strategy, executed slowly, methodically, cutting artists away from managers and family until the women were making decisions alone and afraid, and Denton was the only stable thing in the room. The layer beneath that was more complicated. 2 of Denton Farr's silent financial backers had connections to a New York money laundering network that Hae-jin's organization had been quietly, carefully dismantling for 18 months. Denton was not in that world deliberately. He had simply taken money from people he had not investigated carefully enough, which was its own kind of stupidity, the kind that eventually became someone else's problem. It meant Hae-jin could not move against Denton directly without disturbing something larger that was still in motion. He closed the second layer of the report, called Renee, sent her only the music industry documentation, the contracts, the artists, the pattern of behavior. Nothing about the financial connections, nothing that pointed back to him or to anything he was. "She needs to see this before she signs anything with him," he said. "That is all I am telling you." Renee read it that night, showed Zara the next morning. Zara's first question was not about Denton Farr. How did he get this? Renee said nothing. Zara closed the folder, set it flat on the table.
He's been investigating people around me, without telling me. He was protecting, I didn't ask him to. A pause, quiet, controlled. I didn't ask him to, Renee. She went to work. She did not call him that day. At 10 p.m., her phone rang. She answered. She did not bring it up. Neither did he. They talked for 2 hours about other things entirely, and the folder sat on her kitchen table between them, like a third person neither of them was ready to introduce. This is the part where most people would walk away. Zara didn't. Pay attention to what she does next, because the story is about to change direction in a way nobody sees coming. Subscribe if you haven't. You do not want to come in late on this one.
The call from Seoul came at 7 a.m. New York time. Hae Jin was already awake. He was always already awake. His mother's name on the screen. He looked at it for one full ring before answering. He had learned, over 40 years, that the length of his pause before answering her calls was a reliable measure of how much he already knew the call was going to cost him. This pause was long. Yoon Mi-suk did not raise her voice. She had never raised her voice in his memory, not once, not even when his father died, and she stood at the graveside in the rain and held herself together with the particular stillness of a woman who understood that the organization was watching and that Yoon did not grieve publicly. She said she had seen a photograph, Hae Jin at the back of a Brooklyn showcase, watching an unsigned singer perform. Someone in his circle had sent it. She did not say who. She never said who. She said the Yoon name carried obligations that existed long before his feelings did and would continue long after them. She said she had arranged a dinner with the Lim family, a Korean family, an appropriate match, the kind of alliance that served the organization's long-term stability in ways that personal feelings simply could not. Hae Jin said he would not attend the dinner. His mother was quiet for 3 seconds. In anyone else, 3 seconds was nothing. In Yoon Mi-suk, 3 seconds was a full assessment. She said, "You are not the first Yoon man to believe love is a private matter. You will not be the first to discover it is not." She ended the call. Hae Jin sat with his phone in his hand and looked out the window at a New York morning that was gray and indifferent and ongoing. His mother had never been wrong about anything that cost him something real. That was the most frightening thing about her. Not her authority, not the organization behind her name, just that in 40 years she had never once been wrong. The article ran on a Thursday morning. She found it herself. She was not looking for it. She never looked for things about herself online, had learned early that the internet's opinion of her was information she could not use productively. Mysterious Korean financier's unusual attendance at unsigned artist showcases. It was not cruel. It did not need to be. It simply laid the pattern flat where everyone could see it. His name, her name, 4 separate events across 3 months. A photograph from the Brooklyn showcase, Hae Jin at the back of the room, partially obscured, but his face clear enough for anyone who knew it. She read it once, closed her phone, made coffee. She thought about what the article actually said and what it did not say, and which of those two things was more dangerous for a man whose power depended entirely on not being looked at directly. She understood, before the silence started, that the silence was coming. She understood it the way you understand weather, not because you want it, because you have learned to read the sky. He did not call at 10 p.m. that night. She went to bed at 11, lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and told herself it was fine, that she had known what this was, that a man like Hae Jin Yoon, careful, private, powerful in ways she was still measuring, could not afford to be the subject of entertainment journalism, and she had understood that risk from the beginning, even if she had never said it out loud. She told herself that for 2 nights. By the 3rd night, she had stopped telling herself anything and was simply sitting with the truth of it, which was heavier and more specific than she had expected. It was not the silence that hurt. It was that the silence felt familiar.
The particular quiet of being someone a man wanted in private and was reconsidering in public. She had been that before. She had promised herself she would not be that again. Marcus called from Atlanta at 9 p.m. on the third night. He did not ask if she was okay. He knew his sister well enough to know that question would be received as an accusation. He just stayed on the phone. They talked about their mother's garden and a television show he was watching and a memory from childhood that made her laugh once, genuine, unguarded, and then they said goodnight. She felt marginally better. Then at 10 p.m. on the fourth night, her phone rang. She looked at it. She did not answer. If you are still here, you already know this story is about more than music and more than love. Subscribe if you haven't. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have answered that call? He booked a flight to New York. He did not call ahead, did not send a message through Renee, did not send flowers. He understood, with the particular intelligence of a man who had spent his life reading situations, that this moment required none of the things he usually deployed. No management, no logistics, just him at her door. He did not know that Marcus had arrived in New York 6 hours before him. Marcus sat across from Zara in her kitchen and put 3 printed pages on the table between them, without preamble. He had never been a man who believed in softening things that needed to be understood clearly. He's not a businessman, not primarily. Zara looked at the pages. Shell companies, shipping routes through 3 jurisdictions, entertainment holdings that traced back through 4 layers of careful corporate architecture to an organization with a name that certain people in certain cities did not say above a whisper. She sat with it. How dangerous, she said finally. Depends entirely on which side of him you're on. Which side am I on? Marcus looked at his sister for a long moment. That's what you need to decide, because once you know this, you cannot unknow it. And once he knows that you know, he'll what? Marcus was quiet. I don't know, and the fact that I don't know is the part that concerns me. He left an hour later. She sat alone with the 3 pages spread on her kitchen table, and the city making its relentless noise outside, and she thought about every 10 p.m. call. Every flower with no card, every piece of information that had arrived in her life exactly when she needed it, from a direction she could not quite identify. She thought, he was always exactly what he is. She thought, I just did not have the right language for it yet. Her phone rang. She answered. I'm outside, he said. She looked at her kitchen table, at the 3 pages, at the city lights through her window. I know, she said. She opened the door. She did not move back to let him in immediately. She stood in the doorway and looked at him, really looked, the way she had not allowed herself to look before, and he stood in the hallway and let her. She put Marcus's 3 pages on the table between them without saying anything. He looked at them, looked at her. He did not deny a single word, did not reach for an explanation or a reframe, or the particular verbal architecture men use when they are caught being exactly what they are. He simply waited, the way he always waited, for her to tell him what she needed from the moment. Every time you protected me, she said. The report on Denton, the flowers, 3 months of 10 p.m. calls. Were you protecting me? Or were you managing me? The question sat in the room. Both, he said, in the beginning. And now? He looked at her with the expression she had seen only twice before, late in calls when he thought the conversation had moved past the point where he needed to be careful. The expression where nothing was managed and nothing was performed, and he was simply present, unguarded, slightly terrifying in the way that genuinely open things are terrifying. Now, he said, I don't know how to stop, not because of what I am, because of who you are. She looked at him for a long time. I need you to tell me things, she said. Not reports, not logistics, not flowers with no card. Things. The way you talk to me at 10 p.m., that person, I need that person to be the real one. He is, Hejin said quietly. He is the only one nobody else has ever met. She stepped back from the door. He walked in.
This is the part where most stories end. This one doesn't. Stay with me. 3 weeks later, Denton Farr's name was in every entertainment publication in New York. Renee had connected 2 of his previous artists with a music industry legal advocacy group. The story broke as journalism. Named sources, documented contracts, formal industry complaints. Denton's distribution deals suspended within 48 hours. 3 labels cut ties before the week was out. His roster began leaving quietly, then loudly, then all at once. What no publication reported, what no publication could trace, was that Denton's silent financial backers had withdrawn their support 36 hours before the journalism broke. Without that backing, he had no legal defense, no crisis management, no institutional weight to throw against the story. Kwon Tae-min had handled it. Zara signed with a major label 2 weeks later. Fair terms, full publishing ownership, no hidden clauses in Exhibit C. Renee negotiated it in 4 days because Zara was no longer an unsigned unknown. She was the artist the industry had just watched walk away from a predator without flinching. She did not ask Hejin how clean the path to that deal was. She was not sure she was ready for the answer. At the New York Music Festival, her first performance as a signed artist, press everywhere, cameras at every entrance, Hejin arrived and sat in the front section. Not the back of the room, not across the street. Front section. Alone, in full view of every camera pointed at that stage. By morning, the photographs were on 6 entertainment platforms. His mother called from Seoul. He let it go to voicemail for the first time in his adult life. His board liaison sent a message. He read it, closed his phone, and put it in his pocket. The journalist caught him at the exit. "Mr. Yoon, can you comment on your relationship with Zara Whitmore?" He stopped, looked at the camera with the calm of a man who had made his decision before he walked through the door. "Zara Whitmore," he said, "is the most talented person I have met in my life. Everything else is none of your business." 3 entertainment channels ran it by midnight. In Seoul, Yoon Mi-suk watched it twice on her phone and set it face down on her desk and said nothing to anyone. That night, her apartment, the city quiet for once, or maybe they had both finally stopped listening to it. He said, "I love you because you are the only person who has ever made me want to be known. Not powerful, not careful. Known." She looked at him the way she looked at a song she was still learning, with full attention, nothing withheld. "I know," she said. "Is that enough?" She was quiet for a moment. "Ask me again in 6 months." It was honest. It was not a rejection. It was the most real thing anyone had said to him in years, and he understood it with his whole chest. He stayed. 3 days later, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. No text. Just an image. Hejin, Seoul rooftop. A Korean woman beside him, composed, elegant, her hand resting on his chest in the specific ease of someone who had stood exactly there many times before. City lights behind them both, a timestamp in the corner. 4 weeks ago, the second night of his silence. She looked at it for a long time. Then a second message from the same number. A document, 2 pages, a corporate filing. The major label that had just signed her traced back through 2 holding companies to a parent entity registered in Seoul. Yoon Group Holdings. She sat completely still. He had not just protected her from Denton Farr. He had built the door she walked through, and she had walked through it, believing it was hers. Outside her window, New York was doing what it always did. Enormous, indifferent, loud, entirely unbothered by the quiet way certain things break. She set her phone face down on the table. Then she picked it up again. The label, his name at the bottom of it,
a woman on a Seoul rooftop during the nights he went silent, and a love confession that now has a question mark sitting behind every word. Did Hae-jin Yoon fall in love with Zara Whitmore? Yes, completely, genuinely. But did he also build the career she thought she earned and never once tell her? And the woman on the rooftop, who is she? What does she know about him that Zara is only beginning to understand? Part 2 is coming. Subscribe so you don't miss it. And tell me in the comments, if the love was real but the path was built by his hands, does it count? Or did he take something from her without ever touching it? I'll see you in part 2.